considering South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley for the coveted slot of Secretary of State. That position, over the last few days, seemed like it was headed towards either the former UN Ambassador John Bolton or the former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Many people in Trump's orbit have been unhappy with those two choices and were eager to see other people brought into the mix. This comes amidst signs of continued dissension, disruptions within Trump world. Today, many people in Trump world tried to tamp down the notion that things were going off the rails in the transition. Kellyanne Conway, Trump's campaign manager, spent the day spreading a message of calm, telling reporters in Trump Tower that building a government from scratch is tough stuff.
Well, you don't form a federal government overnight, and these are very serious issues, very serious appointments. I know the president-elect himself, since I talk to him regularly, he's very happy with how transition is going. And from his perspective, he's been presented with any number of choices within each of the agencies and departments, and he's making those tough decisions, and we have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to many of those different positions.
Just in case that message wasn't getting through, Trump went on his favorite social media megaphone today, the Twitter, to dispute the reports that there are any transition trouble. So, John, this Haley thing is big. No other major personnel news today either announced or speculated about beyond what we knew yesterday. So where do things stand?
Well, we talked about this yesterday, and we'll keep talking about it for a while, I assume. To me, they're not like running late in terms of making the major appointments to who are going to take the big jobs. That's not where the disarray is. To me, the disarray is more these reports about infighting, and more importantly, the fact that they seem really far behind in terms of doing the bigger job of staffing the government. They don't seem equipped to hire those 4,000 people, to be in contact with the existing agencies, to be interfacing with the Obama administration. That's where they're way behind. On the big jobs, Kellyanne Conway's right. They should take their time and get it right, and they're not really behind on that as of now.
I agree there are problems, and I'm not trying to minimize them, but the transition I covered most closely was Bill Clinton's in 1992. They were scrambling. They were beset by policy controversies, gays in the military, refugees. I think, again, if we get a couple weeks down the road or even a week down the road and they haven't made significant progress that we can see, then I think there's a problem. But I just don't think by historical standards they're all that far behind.
Well, look, I mean, again, the bottom line is Bloomberg yesterday reporting that there still was no contact going on between the Trump transition and the major agencies. Yeah. But I think they are behind by that measure.
I have no idea.
Undoubtedly. Again, the more recent examples, I mean, we have kind of weird history here, right? 1992 is now a long time ago. 2000 was kind of screwy because of the recount and not knowing who the president was until so late. Barack Obama and his team, meticulous that they were way ahead of the curve, probably by some historical standard. I don't know. But look, let's talk about Nikki Haley, though, because it's an interesting thing. You know, you pointed out a lot of pushback for a lot of reasons against Rudy Giuliani. Now there's discussion of Giuliani's conflicts with people on the countries on the terror watch list that he's had as clients. Nikki Haley would be, symbolically at least, a hugely positive sign. Symbolically. I don't know what kind of depth she has on foreign policy, but just the notion of choosing a mainstream Republican, non-white woman in that job would be a huge step on Trump's part.
I'm not predicting this will be the lineup, but let's say Jeff Sessions decides to stay in the Senate and be kind of Trump's man in the Senate. Right. If you had Ted Cruz at Justice Department, Nikki Haley at State, Tom Cotton at Defense, and Jamie Dimon at Treasury, that would get a lot of people's attention.
There's a lot of ifs there, obviously.
I'm just saying,
but those
are all people I think all are potentially in contention, and that would be a cabinet that would please a lot of people.
The left would be really unhappy about a lot of them, but they're going to be unhappy about anything. No, I'm saying they're going to be happy about anything. But those are picks that would be really different from some of the names we've been hearing up till now. Okay, so sorry about that. We ran real long on that, but whatever. Donald Trump already has courted controversy bigly with his selection of Steve Bannon as his White House chief strategist. But wait, there is more. Two new ruckuses, or is that ruck-eye, being raised over news reports regarding Trump's alleged transitional maneuvers. The first has to do with an NBC News story that says Trump is requesting top-secret clearance for his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, so that Kushner can sit in on the daily presidential security briefing. Instead of knocking down that report, Trump put out a tweet disputing a different story that he was considering security clearances for his 3 adult children. Trump said nothing about Kushner, whose increasingly influential role has some critics citing a federal anti-nepotism law that bars presidents from appointing family members to government jobs. The second controversy has to do with Frank Gaffney, a Pentagon official during the Reagan administration who, a Wall Street Journal report says, will advise the Trump transition team on national security issues. Now, Gaffney has been vocally anti-Muslim and has promoted Islamophobic conspiracy theories in the past, that's putting it mildly, including one about President Obama being a secret Muslim. Trump's team, however, for the record, claims that Gaffney has no role on the transition team. So, Mark, on a scale of 1 to Godzilla, how big a deal are these specific controversies that are causing, as I said, a ruckus to be raised?
You know, still trying to get clarification about why it was so widely reported this morning by many major news organizations that Gaffney was involved, and the language they've given us still doesn't clarify it totally. They're saying he's not involved now. Just the fact that they let the guy involved potentially is a troubling thing. And I'll say again, one of Donald Trump's legacies as a manager is in matters of law regarding the foundation and his businesses, just not buttoned down, not the standards you need in the federal government. On Jared Kushner, he's going to be involved in the administration, and people can say it's inappropriate. People can say it violates rules. Pete Williams of NBC thinks it's fine for him to be employed and to have a clearance.
Pete, on the basis of consulting legal authorities.
Yeah,
not Pete's opinion.
Yeah, his reporting.
Right.
I think, again, the country, for the good of public policy, should deal with the reality. Jared's going to be involved, probably not inside the government, maybe, but probably not. Let's figure out what the right standards are, what's permissible, what's not, what he should do, and let's press for that. But let's not act like this isn't going to happen, because he's going to be reliant on Jared for advice.
Right, I agree with that. But I mean, I think that just raises a whole bunch of things we've talked about already in this show related to the Trump business ventures and how that's all going to work, which I think are really problematic, especially when you have crazy stuff like them putting up profit-making stuff on the .gov website for the Meet the President-elect and Meet the First Lady. That's all just so gross and disgusting. Frank Gaffney is the key issue here. Is this: is he involved or not? If he's involved, it's poison.
Or even was he involved? If he was
poison.
if he's involved, there's one of two options. Either they knew his background and they didn't care, or they failed to vet him.
The dude is poison. If he's not involved, good. That would be good.
Yeah, but if he ever was.
I thought he's hugely problematic. He's not the kind of person.
They need to learn if he had any involvement at all, they need to learn the lesson and not do stuff like that.
Especially given some of the problems that Trump has caused for himself in the past in areas that Gaffney is most odious.
Yep. All right. Kentucky Senator Mitch McConnell was reelected today as the Senate Majority Leader. Bigger news, though, came on the Democratic side when they voted for their leadership positions. Yesterday, we heard lame duck party leader Harry Reid taking after Donald Trump. Today, Reid's successor went in front of the cameras, Chuck Schumer, as expected, elected Senate Minority Leader. And in his first press conference in that role, he announced some new additions to join him in the leadership team, including 2 liberal senators elevated to leadership, Bernie Sanders of Vermont, Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin, and also a Rust Belt moderate from West Virginia, the Senator Joe Manchin. Unlike Reid's response to the election, Schumer began today by saying Senate Democrats were ready to work with Trump on shared objectives while vowing to fight the president-elect whenever the party's values are, quote, under assault. Schumer called on Democrats to build a party that does not take the votes of working-class Americans for granted.
We need to be the party that speaks to and works on behalf of all Americans, and a bigger, bolder, sharper-edged economic message that talks about how people in the middle class and those struggling to make it there can do better.
All right, so we've talked about the Democratic Party in crisis. Schumer's moves are some of the first signs of a post-election party trying to get its act together. John, on the basis of what you just saw and what Schumer did today, how is he doing as somebody trying to grapple with the new reality? I
think Chuck Schumer has been waiting for a long time to be the leader of his party in the Senate. And he's been thinking about how to do it for a long time. He obviously hoped to do it in a circumstance, better political circumstances than the ones that he finds the party in right now.
You don't think he was always thinking, I'll do this under President Trump?
Yeah, or with his party in such obvious disarray. And these are only cosmetic things at this point. The proof is going to be in the proverbial pudding. Like, what do they actually advance? How do they fight against Trump and Republicans? But just in terms of the makeup of that leadership team, that is a Big Tent party. A leadership team that goes from Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren over here to Joe Manchin over here. If that group can hang together, that's the right kind of a face for the party to put forward, it seems to me.
They say stuff. Schumer said, used language I've heard other Democrats grappling with this. Use bigger, sharper message, more focused. They need specific policies that they believe in that address working class voters that they can propose.
Well, I agree
and
with
maybe
that.
even work with Trump on, because Trump may go for some of it.
I 100% agree. If it's just
all this rhetoric,
but you don't want
new people.
This is not the time for them though to be putting forward policy proposals. It's the transition. Yeah, like give the guy, he just announcing his team.
I'd be for new policy proposals today.
Right.
But even if you don't think it's the time, all I'm saying is none of this stuff matters.
Well,
none of it matters. I mean, it's better than nothing. But I mean, you still have
he would be
old leaders in place.
If he did not,
they did not change the leaders.
I agree with that. But if he did not have that spectrum across the ideological spectrum, he'd be getting hammered for either being too far left or too far.
You want me to admit it's better than nothing?
Please.
Better than nothing.
Very good. Okay. Up next, Donald Trump ditching the media for a family dinner last night. We had a spy on the inside who will tell us about that scene after this. Donald J. Trump gave his press pool the slip last night, about 2 hours after reporters were informed by the campaign or the transition team that the president-elect was in Trump Tower and locked up tight for the evening. Trump and his family took it on the hoof, on the lam, went out to dinner at the 21 Club. How do we know that that's where he went? Bloomberg's intrepid 21 Club correspondent Kate Smith, seen here hovering behind the president-elect, was there when Trump and his family arrived. We caught up with Ms. Smith in the Bloomberg hallway and asked her to file this report.
So last night, my colleagues and I were having dinner at the 21 Club, and we noticed that there was a very famous person sitting behind us. It was Ivanka Trump and her husband. About 20 minutes after we noticed that she was there, and came the entire Donald Trump clan. It wasn't exactly a standing ovation. It was more like a muted acknowledgement that he was there. Maybe half a dozen people got up to clap for him. He ordered a $36 burger and a Virgin Bloody Mary. We did hear that he was talking about a potential female press secretary.
Wow. That's stellar reporting, Kate. Thank you for that. Not telling the press pool about the president-elect's whereabouts is, of course, a major break in protocol, and one that the White House Correspondents Association called, quote, unacceptable in its statement about Trump's excursion. This was not the first time that Trump has shunned his traveling press corps. He's done it as a candidate and as president-elect. His spokeswoman, Hope Hicks, told reporters that a so-called protective pool hasn't officially been set up yet, and the journalists will eventually have, quote, all of the access that they have ever had under any president. Now, every incoming president invariably claims that he won election by going over the heads of the press corps, and then he bridles when the press corps demands that he give up any semblance of his privacy for the sake of public accountability. Enter Donald Trump, who has argued more flamboyantly than any of his predecessors that the MSM is irrelevant and whose privacy was more or less sacrosanct until he entered the political arena. So, Mark, What is going to happen now with Donald Trump? Will he inevitably be brought to heel by the press like every other past president? Or can this guy be the guy who actually says, screw it, I'm going to do what I want?
I'm optimistic and hopeful, but the press has to really be diligent about this, and we need to always talk about it in terms of the public interest. We need to be with the president-elect and the president of the United States, not because we're trying to bother him, but because it is our job to cover him. And in the world in which we live, it's Kennedy assassination, 9/11.
Reagan assassination attempt.
It's just essential that this exists. And what I don't want is for this fight to become such a lightning rod, as important as it is, that we don't think about all the areas in which we need to fight so that there is the kind of coverage the American public not just wants, but needs and deserves of this administration.
The press has an obligation to try to hold Donald Trump accountable against all of the norms that we expect from every president, Republican and Democrat. This is not a more important norm, but this is a norm, and there are reasons for it. It's not that we're voyeurs, and it's not that we particularly want to be peeping Toms in some way. It is the case that he's the most powerful, important person in the world, and if something happens to him, the public deserves to know at the moment, as quickly as possible, that thing has happened, in case he's incapacitated, as you said, and the power has to be transferred to another officer in the government, the vice president or someone else. It is important that the public deserves to know that, and the president should be respectful enough of the public that elected him that he should say, okay, this is a price of being president of the United States. Yeah. I will willingly, and in some ways even gladly, pay it.
I go back to the Clinton experience because, again, it's the transition I covered most closely. 1993, that White House started to change things. They closed the access to the media to the upper press office where the press secretary's office was. They made a number of changes. And when I said, and other reporters said to the Clinton people, you can't do this way. This has never been done this way. They said, we don't care. Never been done this way. We're not playing by those rules. We're playing by different rules. Some of the rules perhaps are arbitrary. Some of the rules perhaps are antiquated. But the basic function must be allowed. They cannot cut off the public's access to the President of the United States and the President-elect capriciously. They have to adhere to the norms because they're norms for a reason.
The President can't be out in the middle of the night night clubbing in Manhattan without anybody knowing where he is. It's not.
Sign Fonzie up for that. All right, up next, we'll talk to someone who wants to be the next head of the DNC.
21 Club.
After these words from our sponsors. Cheers. Democratic Party regroups after their election shellacking. The race to lead the Democratic National Committee is on. We're joined now by someone who has thrown his hat in the ring to be the chair of the National Party, the South Carolina Democratic Party chair, Jamie Harrison. He joins us now from the great city of Columbia, South Carolina. Mr. Chairman, thank you for joining us again. Nice to have you back on.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Tell us why Hillary Clinton lost the presidential election.
Well, she won the popular vote, but she lost with the Electoral College. And a lot of that has to do with that this whole election was about people wanting to feel like they mattered. You had African Americans who've been saying for the past 2 years that Black Lives Matter. You had young people, even Bernie Democrats, saying that their voices were not did not matter in the Democratic Party. And I think you had rural working class folks saying, you know, Donald Trump is speaking to us because we do matter. And so, in essence, I think the Democratic Party has to get back to making sure that people, one, understand that we're listening to them, and two, that we appreciate them and know that they do matter. And that's where the fight is about the future of the Democratic Party.
Whose fault is it that didn't happen in this election?
I don't know if there's one individual that's fault. I think this has been simmering a long time, partly because I think our state parties have not gotten the love and the support that they so desperately need. I mean, the front line of having a strong party is the grassroots level, and that's state parties. And so we really have to once again invest in state parties. I know here in South Carolina, the only way that we break through is if we have a national partner that can help us and provide us the resources, the talent and know-how that they have in Washington, D.C. And we got the muscle down here in South Carolina. But you have to have that partnership.
Jamie, a large part of the Democratic electorate, particularly the part that was in favor of Bernie Sanders in the Democratic nomination fight, looks at the WikiLeaks emails and other pieces of evidence and says the DNC is corrupt, was corrupt in this last cycle, and rigged the entire process to give Hillary Clinton the nomination and to screw Bernie Sanders. Do you agree with that?
No, listen, I think there was a lot of long-time relationships that people had with the Clinton administration, and probably was too close. I mean, listen, I even had a friendly relationship with a lot of folks on the Clinton campaign, but I also had a lot of friends on the Bernie Sanders campaign as well. Even some of my staff was there. And so one of the things that we have to do is we have to make people trust the system again. We have to make them trust the party again. And the only way that we do that is by showing them, and all of these people are on the grassroots level, show them that we respect them, show that we're going to invest in them. And I think that's how you get them to once again come back to the party.
Jamie, if you became the chair of the party, what would you do? I mean, in a concrete way, what would you do to reassure the parts of the party right now that, again, feel like the DNC has been stacked against them? What would you do to make them believe that the DNC was playing fair going forward?
Well, you know, the one thing is, and the operative word is going forward. You can't go back and clean up whatever happened at that time. So all you can do is tell people, look at what we're going to do and work with us in order to build that. You be a part of this. So for a few things. One, I think that, you know, young people want to make sure their voices are heard. And right now, instead of just making the copies and picking up coffee, they want to have a seat at the table. I think we need to add a millennial chair, or what we have here in South Carolina is one of our vice chairs is under the age of 35. I think the DNC needs to add that voice to the table so that young people have a seat. I think there are things that we have to do with our state party, what I call the 50 states plus. We have to amp up and increase the amount of money that we're giving to state parties so that they can become the innovation centers for all the things that we can do on campaigns. You know, we have a fellowship here in South Carolina where we built this bench of talent, and we call it the Jim Clyburn Political Fellowship, where we train one young person from every county in the state of South Carolina with a goal by 2020 of having 250 young people across the state trained to run for office, run our county party operations, or be political operatives. Those are the types of things that I think if we did them in the states, we can strengthen that so that it doesn't matter if you have a charismatic leader like Barack Obama who's running for president or a policy wonk like Hillary Clinton. You can still touch the people and get the vote out.
Mr. Chairman, there's some people who are formally in the race like you. There's others who are said to be thinking about it. Handicap the race. Who's the front runner for chair right now?
Well, right now, this is the thing. Whomever's the next chair has to be a full-time chair, 24/7, dedicated to running the DNC and working with 50 states. You got 50 states,
I know you and others think that, but who's the front runner? Are you the front?
I don't know
if
there is a front runner.
So wide open?
I don't. I think it's wide open. You know, I don't know if there's a front runner right now because many of the members that I'm talking to said, listen, we're trying to listen to everybody. We want to see what who's going to be in the race, and then we'll make a determination from that point. Well, so what I'm telling people is go ahead. Sorry.
Will Debbie Wasserman Schultz go down in history as a good chair, great chair, bad chair?
I mean, there were very positive aspects of Debbie's chairmanship, and then there were things that didn't work well.
Like what?
And so,
what's in the second category?
I don't. Well, I mean, do I need to say what's in the second category? I mean, the fact that you have a lot of people who are upset with the DNC. And so, listen, Debbie was very helpful here in South Carolina anytime we needed, but there's a lot of folks who didn't feel that way. And so, you know, I consider Debbie a good friend, and I know she tried, but in the end, we have to move on from that and to build the next generation of the DNC.
Mr. Chairman, we only have a few seconds left, but just to answer this question, the importance of the party right now is to focus on the base and building up the base, or to try to focus more on the center of the electorate. Where's the future for the Democratic Party in that regard?
You win elections by addition and not subtraction. And so that's all of the approach. That's base, but that's also reaching out to working class people in rural America, where we've lost over the past few years. And so again, it's addition, not subtraction. And I think Donald Trump is going to disappoint a lot of the people who voted for him this time around, and we're going to be able to add those people in the 2018 race.
Okay, Jamie Harrison, thank you very much. Good luck in the race. Political strategist Liz Smith, Steve Schmidt, join us right here, right now, right after this.
Welcome back. With us now is Democratic strategist Liz Smith, who worked as the deputy presidential campaign manager for Martin O'Malley and was director of rapid response for Barack Obama's presidential campaign in 2012. She's sad because Boris Epstein is not here. Also, instead of Boris Epstein, we have Republican Stephen Schmidt, former chief strategist for John McCain's presidential race and an MSNBC political analyst. Lady, gentlemen, good to see you. There's some dispute about how messed up the Trump transition is. What do you think? Messed up or kind of like basically par for the course?
Oh, it's really messed up. I mean, and that's the thing is, he was a chaos candidate. I don't think people want a chaos president, and nothing he's done so far has, calmed anyone's fears about that. The question is, how much is it trickling down to normal people? I don't think that much. But, with any transition, and you know this, you float a lot of trial balloons, but it seems like all the warring factions in his camp are throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks. They're already saying that it's broken out into a knife fight. So I think they've got to get their act together and project a little more confidence and competence.
You don't need knives for spaghetti, but knife fight, spaghetti fight, what's going on over there? Good?
No, it's a knife fight. It's messed up. It's disorganized and chaotic. One would expect nothing less. But, look, we'll have a clearer sense a couple of weeks from now. One encouraging sign is they said they were going to drain the swamp. I think it's entirely possible that it was news to them that the transition team was stocked floor to ceiling with Washington lobbyists, and now it's going to take a week or so to get them all out. And that's probably a good sign and consistent with his message. But we'll know in another week or two.
Joe Scarborough is reporting Nikki Haley, South Carolina governor, under consideration for Secretary of State. In terms of substance, you've worked in the national security realm, and in terms of optics, what do you think of that possible pick?
Look, she was an impressive political leader during the shooting in South Carolina, her handling of the Confederate flag controversy. I think that she's someone, as you look ahead in the Republican Party, is someone who's a serious candidate, potentially for future higher office. I have no idea if she knows anything about national security issues, anything about the complexity of the world. I guess we'll find out in hearings, but certainly someone far outside the realm of the national security establishment that one would think to as you look to fill that post.
What do you think of the prospect of a Secretary Haley as opposed to a Secretary Giuliani from the point of view of competence and ideology and unity?
Well, look, I mean, it's less frightening as compared to a lot of the names that are thrown out. To Democrats, it's less frightening to hear a Haley than a Bolton or Giuliani. She doesn't strike fear through us. But again, to Steve's point, what's her experience? What qualifies her to sit down with these national leaders? And the unfortunate thing about Trump is that he hasn't surrounded himself with a lot of heavyweights on his side. And the biggest concern I think that a lot of people have is, how is he going to handle an international crisis? And when he's tested with an international crisis, don't you want him to be surrounded with some foreign policy heavyweights? She doesn't qualify as one. So I think, again, it goes back to me saying that they're throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks.
To stick with foreign policy and national security again, because it's a specialty of yours, if you looked at just the range of names that have been floated, and not just for Secretary of State, but defense, for Chris Kobach, all these names that have got there, can you discern better now what the Trump ideology is, what Trump actually believes? Or do you look at this range of names and say, I still don't have any idea what this guy actually wants to do on the basis of what we have seen so far?
There's no way to look at any of those names and have any idea what the agenda is, what the governing philosophy is at any level. I mean, you don't.
Just to put it simply, right?
I mean, some of the names floated, really are the political equivalent of the cast of the cantina scene from the Star Wars movies. And you have people that simply are not confirmable. And I think that it bears. And I think it bears mentioning today. Orrin Hatch shot down cold the notion that they're getting rid of the filibuster. They can lose 3 votes on any nomination. And so John McCain and Lindsey Graham, for instance, are going to take a very tough line on people who have diluted sensibilities about the intentions of Vladimir Putin, for instance.
Yeah, but also you have Murkowski, you've got Susan Collins. And when people say that Republicans have control of the White House, the House, the Senate, they're not looking at the never-Trumped Republicans in the Senate, and I think that they could be a real roadblock going forward. But, to your point, they are throwing a lot of some random names. Like Kobach is the one that scares me the most.
You were a sometimes critic of the Clinton administration. What's going on with campaign. Sorry. What's going on in your circles now in terms of kind of accounting for why she lost and what the fallout of that should be?
Well, first of all, I think people are starting to come to terms with the fact that she lost, and it's not necessarily just that Donald Trump won. my fear is that some people are taking the wrong lessons from this, and that they're saying it needs to be an either or, that we either need to talk to, the white working class or talk to Latinos and, black voters, that we either need to go with the Sanders people or we either need to go with the Clinton people. And that's why I think it's really important to learn the lessons from 2016, where we saw all the Democratic heavyweights, the DNC, throw its weight behind one very flawed candidate, not allow really any debate or any emergence of a robust debate. And we should have a chair debate all across the country. Let's go to all the states that Hillary Clinton lost, that Democrats should have won, and have an open debate with as many candidates as possible. I don't have a favorite in the chair race. And, I saw Jamie Harrison on before. He's a good guy. I've done work with him. Ray Buckley, good guy. Keith Ellison, good guy, but we need to have a robust debate about where we go going forward and reject a lot of the false dichotomies being thrown out there.
How much will the Trump administration, do you think, reach out to Democrats? Would that be a good thing to do?
Well, look, an enormous upgrade today with the elevation of Chuck Schumer to the minority leader, replacing Harry Reid, somebody who is not a obstructionist, somebody who wants to get things done. But to the point, Donald Trump will have to work effectively with Democrats. The notion that this is a unified Republican monolithic bloc is just wrong. This is the closest we've ever been to a European-style coalition government. The Trump party and the Republican Party, though cousins, are not the same party. And so, for example, when Donald Trump in his transition says, we're going to spend $1 trillion on an infrastructure package, you have a lot of Republican members of Congress laughing out loud. There's no appetite in the conservative wing of the Conservative Party to spend $1 trillion on infrastructure. So his coalitions and his ability to work effectively are going to be tested. And this is why the Bannon issue is such a serious one, that if Democrats refuse to let up, and I think that Democrats will refuse to let up on that question, it's going to cripple at a real fundamental ability the ability to have coalitions. It poisons the sauce.
The spaghetti. I want to stay with you just because we've been doing this with some of our friends here. Did it yesterday with Mike Murphy and Bill Carrick, people who were absolutely incredibly confident for weeks. There was no possible way Donald Trump could win, stake their reputations on it. I just want to do a little. I thought I was wrong. I'll say it again. You were really wrong. Why were you wrong?
I had a lack of imagination. I never thought it possible that 6 million Democratic voters who supported Barack Obama would sit this election out. I underestimated her deficiencies as a candidate. I called Donald Trump very early in the primaries. Thought he would be the nominee. Right. But I did not think that at the end of the day that the American people would vote for someone who was so unprepared and demonstrably so through the debates, that had the type of character deficiencies that he had, and I was wrong about it. The anger of this country is something else, and I do think that you now will see a lateral line define politics, and above that line, people who benefited from the technological revolution and globalization, and we just heard from the people below in both parties who've been left behind by it.
You were wrong too.
I was.
You were in some ways more flagrantly wrong, but you were wrong.
Yeah.
So why were you wrong?
I maybe out of optimism that people would vote for Donald Trump, but look, I gave in to the same flawed assumptions that everyone else did. That Democrats, that young voters, that Latino voters, that black voters would turn out against Donald Trump, despite the fact that Hillary Clinton wasn't really articulating a reason for them to do that. And that was a big mistake on our part, and that is something Democrats need to learn from. We don't need to just focus on white working class voters. We need to give everyone a reason to turn out and vote for Democrats going forward.
Do you believe the children are our future? She's not even listening.
Literally, they are. Literally.
We're talking about you.
I got to ask you one more question, though. I know we're running over a little bit on this. I just want to come back to this. You, in addition to being wrong about this election, you also have been very critical of Trump's temperament, suitability for the office, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of Republicans who made those arguments are now grappling with how to confront him as president, what the proper attitude is. Do you put your reservations beside and hope for the best, or do you continue to be a critic on the temperamental, intellectual, other grounds? Where are you as you look at this presidency about how you should feel like you should confront Trump or accommodate yourself to Trump or whatever?
It was a legitimate election result. This is how we pick our leaders in the United States. However, the authoritarian impulses that we saw in the primary, the use of a Twitter account to intimidate, particularly towards a free press, cronyism, corruption, incompetence. People need to be prepared to speak out against it. Look, the stakes are very, very high. As someone who's been around a president of the United States and had that honor in my life, the immense power of this office is something that everybody, whether they were friend or foe to him in the campaign, needs to think very seriously about. He's now the most powerful person in the world. He has the destiny of our nation in his hands. He has the authority to end life on this planet if he chooses to do so. That's a real thing. And so, as we think about a Trump candidacy, when he's right, support him.
Presidency.
Right? A Trump presidency. When the president-elect becomes president, when he's right, support him. When he's wrong, oppose him.
All right. Liz Smith, Steve Schmidt, you're both awesome, although you were wrong. I partly relied on you. I blame you when people say, why was I wrong?
I think everyone
I listened to Schmidt, for Christ's sakes. All right, we'll continue this transition talk next. If you're watching us in Washington, D.C., you can listen to us on the radio at Bloomberg 99.1 FM. We'll be right back.
Trump transition speeds along, and we're joined now in Washington by two reporters who are awaiting his arrival in January. NBC political correspondent Casey Hunt is on Capitol Hill, and Bloomberg Politics senior national political reporter Jennifer Jacobs is in our D.C. bureau. Casey, I want to talk to you about the Republican leadership in the House. There was all this talk leading up to the election that Paul Ryan might lose his job, and then all of a sudden he was unanimously reelected. How did that happen?
Funny how that works. It's the one thing that seemed to help Republican unity coming out of Donald Trump's election. Essentially, the Freedom Caucus that were, the kind of right-wing conservative agitators that so frustrated John Boehner when he was Speaker, had been contemplating a challenge to Speaker Ryan in the event that Hillary Clinton won the election. But Trump getting elected made unity among House Republicans kind of the imperative. Although I have to tell you, the mood in the room when House Republicans Republicans met. They all got those Make America Great Again hats sitting on their chairs. They kind of walked out of the caucus wearing them. People who were inside the room told me that the mood was kind of solid. People were very happy to be back and to be in the situation that they are, but it was not euphoric, right? You'd normally expect that if one party won the presidency and also controlled both houses of Congress, the celebration would be hard to contain, and that's just not the case, because a lot of Republicans up here are still nervous about exactly what this means. Donald Trump has not exactly won this election on conservative policies necessarily. They're talking about spending $1 trillion on infrastructure. It's not clear how to replace the health care plan. There are so many questions up here. I think House Republicans have gotten to a better place over the last 7 days, but it started off pretty confusing.
Jennifer, I want to ask you a question about a Republican Senator, Ted Cruz. He was a supporter of Trump early on in the nomination fight. Then, of course, they were pretty bitter rivals. Then he insulted him at the convention, then endorsed him at the end. And now he's at Trump Tower yesterday, and his name's been floated for Attorney General. So what are the prospects that that could actually happen? What's the reaction been since that notion became part of the dialogue?
Yeah, so they needed him to come up. It was kind of an audition yesterday, so there's been a lot of lobby intrigue. All these reporters are staked out in the lobby. They're watching like hawks who shows up to go up that elevator to talk to Trump, and Ted Cruz was one of them. And at first, they were denying it had anything to do with a cabinet post, and in fact, Cruz's own staff was saying it just had to do with the agenda for the Senate and Cruz wanting to promote some, his agenda. But then that transition team just keeps floating names, and I was told pretty late last night that, yeah, sure enough, we are discussing him for Attorney General. And Cruz didn't necessarily know that when he showed up, but he was indeed being auditioned. They also, according to David Martosco from the Daily Mail, were asking him questions about, who would he recommend for some undersecretary positions for Justice and Homeland Security. So they were just kind of waiting to see how they got along with him. And when I asked today, I said, what's the reaction been to the news that you guys are considering him? And they said, strong.
Jennifer, let me just stay with you on the Kushner security clearance story. What's the deal there?
Jared's been the focus of the day today on a lot of pushback. So a lot of the transition team members have been defending him, saying, listen, he doesn't have a personal vendetta against Chris Christie. They got along very well. There were other reasons why some of these Christie folks are being pushed out and why lobbyists are being pushed out. There's also been this controversy about, whether he would get the top secret classified clearance to attend the president's daily briefings. And I was told that essentially, one person inquired about that out of an abundance of caution, just wanting to be prepared and just asking what the procedures for that would be if that were something that would be necessary or wanted. And it wasn't really authorized by anybody with the campaign or the transition, but this person went ahead and did it. And so, they're just trying to tell me that there was a simple, innocent mistake. Right.
Okay. Casey, Democrats. A lot of action up there on Capitol Hill today with Senator Schumer and his new leadership slate. The party's still kind of a mess, though, at the moment. So let's talk about how things are on Capitol Hill with the Democrats.
Just about the only thing they're united on is Steve Bannon. They all think he should go, although it doesn't seem as though Donald Trump is willing to do that. But beyond that, Democrats are facing a pretty bleak couple of years here. On the Senate side, they can't for the life of them find somebody to lead the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee charged with reelecting Democrats and holding the 25 seats that they're going to have up next year or next cycle. There's just a hole there because it's really an impossible job to have to do. Schumer is trying to corral everyone who could possibly be a problem for him into one room. So he added Joe Manchin on the one hand and Bernie Sanders on the other to his leadership team to try to, it's not quite, keep your enemies closer because they're obviously all on the same team, but there's an element of that going on. He wants to make sure that the people that could potentially cause the most trouble for him are in the room and not outside of it. So I think that's a little bit of what you're seeing. But the reality is there's still, and he joked about this, he said, oh, these people are young in Senate years. There just isn't a lot of fresh blood for Democrats up here on Capitol Hill right now. That's true on the House side also. Nancy Pelosi is facing this unexpectedly stiff resistance to her simply becoming majority leader again. She has ruled with a pretty iron fist, as many Democrats have described to me in recent days. And the frustration with her is real, but there's not necessarily somebody who's stepping up, a person, to channel that frustration in a way that could actually be a threat to her. So it looks like she's likely to continue, but none of this solves the Democrats' overall problem, which is that it's not clear who the next generation of leadership for them is. I think there's this feeling that the Clintons kind of stifled anyone else from running for president. The Hill leadership has been the same for many years now, over a decade, really, and a lot of the younger members feel really frustrated. Now, of course, you have this division based on geography. You have essentially the coastal wing of the party versus the middle of the country. And, you know, one person put it to me that, hey, they want somebody who can walk into a union hall and be taken seriously, not necessarily push people around, but seem like a big deal. Of course, the implication is that Nancy Pelosi is not that person. Now, you know, you can read into it what you will, the reasons for that, but I think that tension is going to define the Democratic back and forth for a while. And as you guys know very well, Democrats are often a little less top down, I would say, in their leadership. So I think there's some risk here that there's going to be a lot of intra-party back and forth for quite a while. I don't really quite see how this gets solved in the immediate term.
I want to ask you both for real quick answers to a simple question, starting with Jennifer. Your sources in Democrat, Republican Party right now, what adjectives would you use to describe how they're feeling about where we are post-election?
Well, if you ask the Trump team, they say they're, you know, 1 week removed from the most brutal campaign in history.
I'm asking about the mood of the people you're dealing with. Are they excited? Are they scared? How do they seem?
If the Trump people seem excited.
Excited. Casey, how do Republicans and Democrats on Capitol Hill seem to you?
I think the Democrats feel like they're pretending they're not despondent. Which is sometimes a winning battle, sometimes a losing one. I think Republicans are confused but determined, I would say. They're trying to figure out how to push their way through it.
Okay.
That's how I feel most of the time, confused but determined.
Casey Hunt, both determined and not confused. Jennifer Jacobs, maybe semi-giddy.
Yeah.
Thank you both. John and I will be right back. Welcome back. So tonight, Hillary Clinton makes her return of sorts. Ever since she gave her concession speech the day after Election Day, she has been largely out of sight. And tonight she gives a speech in Washington. John, what will you be looking for?
Well, Children's Defense Fund will feel like home to her. It's a very comfortable place for her to speak. She's got a long association with that organization. I really will look for her to, we've heard what she said in private. We have some reporting on it. I think it would be a very good look for her to stand up and say, you know what? I lost this election, and here's my self-analysis for why. And here takes some blame on herself.
Predict right now, will she mention that she won the popular vote or not?
Oh, I think there's about a 99.743% chance that she will mention that. Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk all about that speech tomorrow right here on the program. John and I will be right back. Grab your internet contraption and go to BloombergPolitics.com right now. Story up there about what Senate Republicans could do to slow Donald Trump's cabinet confirmations, where the trouble might exist for Trump within his own party. Bloomberg Technology is next. John and I'll be back here tomorrow, same bad time, same bad channel. Until tomorrow, thanks for watching. Sayonara.
I'm Mark Crumpton. You're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's begin with a check of First Word News. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio met today with President-elect Donald Trump at Trump Tower. De Blasio told reporters the discussion covered several issues, including immigration.
That proposal countered and flew in the face of all that was great about New York City, the ultimate city of immigrants. A place that has succeeded because it was open for everyone, a place built of generation after generation of immigrants.
Iranian President Hassan Rouhani says his country remains committed to a landmark nuclear deal regardless of who's in the White House. President-elect Trump has criticized the deal, which caps Iran's nuclear activities. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry today made an appeal to all nations to continue the fight against climate change. At a UN climate summit in Morocco, Kerry said failure would be, quote, a betrayal of devastating consequences. President-elect Trump has called climate change a hoax and has pledged to cancel the Paris deal, limiting greenhouse gases. Legendary singer-songwriter Bob Dylan, winner of this year's Nobel Prize in Literature, won't attend ceremonies next month in Stockholm. The Swedish Academy says Dylan told them that, quote, other commitments make it unfortunately impossible. I'm Mark Crumpton in New York. Bloomberg Technology is next.
I'm Emily Chang, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, Cisco shares sliding after the company forecasts a tech spending slowdown on the horizon. The full earnings report ahead. Plus, Twitter suspends the accounts of prominent white supremacists as it attempts to curb abuse and harassment. And famed short seller Jim Chanos says Tesla shareholders should, quote, have their heads examined if they approve the pending deal. His full comments ahead. First, to our lead. Fallout from the election of Donald Trump continues to ripple through the tech world, especially when it comes to social media companies.